Book 5, What Our Land Policy Should Be. Stave 1. How we should dispose of our new land. When we reflect what land is, when we consider the relations between it and labor, when we remember that to own the land upon which a man must gain his subsistence is to all intents and purposes to own the man himself, we cannot remain in doubt as to what should be our policy in disposing of our public lands. We have no right to dispose of them except to actual settlers, to the men who really want to use them. No right to sell them to speculators, to give them to railroad companies, or to grant them for agricultural colleges. No more right to do so than we have to sell or to grant the labor of the people who must someday live upon them. And to actual settlers, we should give them. Give, not sell. For we have no right to step between the man who wants to use land and land which is as yet unused, and to demand of him a price for our permission to avail himself of his Creator's bounty. The cost of surveying and the cost of administering the land office may be proper charges, but even these it would be juster and wiser to charge as general expenses, to be borne by the surplus wealth of the country, by the property which settlement will make more valuable. We can better afford to bear the necessary expenses of the land office than we can the expense of keeping useless men of war at sea or idle troops in garrison posts. When we can give a few rich bankers 20 or 30 millions a year, we can afford to pay a few millions in order to make our public lands perfectly free. Let the settler keep all of his little capital. It is his seed wheat. When he has gathered his crop, then we may take our toll, with usury if need be, and we should give only in limited quantities. For while every man has a right to as much land as he can properly use, no man has a right to any more, and when others do or will want it, cannot take any more without infringing on their rights. 160 acres is too much to give one person. It is more than he can cultivate, and our great object should be to give everyone an opportunity of employing his own labor, and to give no opportunity to anyone to appropriate the labor of others. We cannot afford to provide so much in view of the extent of the public domain and the demand for homes yet to be made upon it. While we are calling upon all the world to come in and take our land, let us save a little for our own children. Nor can we afford to give so much in view of the economic loss consequent upon the dispersion of population. 4 families to the square mile are not enough to secure the greatest return to labor and the least waste in exchanges. 80 acres is quite enough for anyone, and I am inclined to think 40 acres is still nearer the proper amount. There should be, but this is the only way of disposing of the agricultural lands. None at all should be given to the states, except such as was actually needed for sites of public buildings. None at all for school funds or agricultural colleges. The earnings of self-employed, independent people, upon which the state may at any time draw, constitute the best school fund. To diffuse wealth so that the masses may enjoy the luxury of learning is the best way to provide for colleges. Some objections. It will be said, if the public land is to be morselled out in this way, what is to be done for stock ranches and sheep farms? There will be the unused land, the public commons. Let the large herds and flocks keep upon that, moving farther along as it is needed for settlement. But there would be plenty of stock kept on 80-acre or even 40-acre farms. In Belgium, each 6-acre farmer has his cow or 2 of the best breed and keeps them in the best condition. And it may be said, there is some land which requires extensive work for its reclamation. Capital cannot be induced to undertake this work if the land is given away in small pieces. But if capital cannot, labor can. The most difficult reclamation in the world, that of turning the shifting sands of the French seacoast into gardens, has been done by 10 and 12-acre farmers. Observe that it is proposed to give the lands only to actual settlers. Is there any of our land that requires for its reclamation greater capital than that involved in the labor of 16 men to the square mile, working to make themselves homes? The cost of reclaiming the swamplands of California, which has been made an excuse for giving them away by the 100,000 acres, does not, in most cases, equal the cost of the fencing required on the uplands. Let men be sure that they are working for themselves, give them a little stake in the general prosperity, and labor will combine intelligently and economically enough. How settlement would go on. Under such a policy as this, settlement would go on regularly and thoroughly. The population would not, at the same time, spread over as much ground as under the present policy, but what it did spread over would be well settled and well cultivated. There would be no necessity for building costly railroads to connect settlers with a market. The market would accompany the settlement. No one would go out into the wilderness to brave all the hardships and discomforts of the solitary frontier life. But with the foremost line of settlement would go church and schoolhouse and lecture room. The ill-paid, overworked mechanic of the city could find a home on the soil where he would not have to abandon all the comforts of civilization, but where there would be society enough to make life attractive, and where the wants of his neighbors would give a market for his surplus labor until his land began to produce. And to tell those who complain of want of employment and low wages to make for themselves, homes on the public domain would then be no idle taunt. Consider, too, the general gain from this mode of settlement. How much of our labor is now given to transportation and wasted in various ways because of the scattering of our population, which land grabbing has caused?